There are many ways to approach film analysis, but it all boils down to looking at movies, or more specifically, looking closely at movies. Film analysis requires moving beyond passively watching cinema to actively identify and dissect the many images and sounds that comprise any given movie. Analysis makes us notice and interpret techniques and meaning that most of us intuitively absorb but rarely consciously acknowledge. Analysis allows you to see how a movie functions and to actively understand what that movie is telling you and what the movie can tell us about the artists and culture that produced it. All this meaning can be found by examining a film's content, in other words, the subject matter, what the movie's about, and the film form, which is the means through which that subject is expressed. Since our textbook is primarily dedicated to understanding film form, let's start with formal analysis. A formal analysis evaluates all the relevant elements of cinematic language that make up a shot, sequence, or scene, so we can understand how these elements of film form work together to convey mood, meaning, and character state of mind. For example, let's do a formal analysis of the clinic waiting room sequence from director Jason Reitman's movie Juno. First, since few movie scenes are self-contained, we should consider its context. We enter the scene expecting Juno to abort her decidedly unwanted pregnancy. Previous scenes convey this attitude. When she takes a pregnancy test and confides with her friend Leah, schedules the procedure, and reacts to the objections of Sue Chin, a pro-life demonstrator outside the clinic. All of these moments and more create an expectation of Juno's state of mind that we take with us into the waiting room sequence. This expectation is cemented just before Juno enters the clinic when she responds with indifference to Sue Chin's claim that it has fingernails. And as we'll see, that moment does more for the waiting room scene than create an expectation. It also informs our understanding of the scene's ultimate meaning, which is all about Juno changing her mind. Let's also consider some visual context presented in the moments before the waiting room scene. The design of the overall look of the place does not reflect well on the clinic and, by extension, the procedure. Beginning with the Spartan parking lot and the cheesy stone facade, then on to the outdated decor, utilitarian reception area, and unpleasant receptionist. So we viewers enter the scene in question assuming that Juno has made up her mind, but not necessarily charmed by the setting and everything it represents. So, here goes. The first shot of the sequence in question features a slow dolly in, which gradually enlarges Juno in frame, increasing her visual significance as she casually fills out the clinic admittance form. This shot reestablishes Juno's pattern of casual indifference so that the breaking of that pattern, which is coming right up, will have maximum impact. Her relaxed state of mind is further emphasized by the shot's relatively long 10-second duration. As we'll see, the shots will soon grow shorter and shorter as Juno's emotional state shifts. Towards the end of the shot, another crucial element enters the mix. A sound breaks the silence. It's a soft sound, but it motivates a dramatic cut. Suddenly, we shift from a pretty loose, wide framing to a very up-close view of Juno's face. This sudden spatial shift does a couple of things. It gives the moment, and the sound, importance. We know that noise means something. It also conveys Juno's thought process. We recognize that the sound is important to her, too. She notices it. Her attention switches from the clipboard to the sound. As shot 2 continues, Juno turns her head and the camera moves and adjusts focus to shift into Juno's point of view. Essentially looking through Juno's eyes, we see the source of the sound. And that sound is unnaturally loud, which signals that we're not just hearing what's going on in the room, we have moved inside Juno's head. We're going to be bouncing back and forth between observing Juno from the outside and seeing things through her eyes and emotions for the rest of the sequence. Notice the little girl staring back at Juno and us. This element helps to associate the fingernail sound with Juno's dormant guilt. Now we cut back to Juno's reaction. Her expression seals the deal. She's troubled by what's going on. and her juxtaposition connects her anxious expression to the girl and the fingernail-drumming mother. And the camera continues to creep in on her. The gradual intensification caused by enlarging a subject in frame by moving the camera towards them is often used to convey a character at a moment of realization. Within a half second, another noise joins the mix, and Juno's head turns in response. Again, by juxtaposing this new shot with the last shot of Juno looking, the movie communicates that we are now experiencing Juno's point of view. Again, we and Juno are looking at the source of an exaggerated fingernail sound. But the size of this subject in frame is too large to indicate exactly what Juno would see. She isn't that close to this set of thumbs. The enlarged size indicates significance. We are experiencing not only what Juno sees, but how she feels about it. Juno's psychological point of view tells us that the sight has a big effect on her. Again, we cut back to Juno. The camera is still creeping in on her. Another fingernail sound joins the mix. Again, Juno looks. Again, we cut to a point-of-view shot framed so as to emphasize the fingernails and to indicate Juno's state of mind, which is getting increasingly troubled. So troubled that she can actually hear someone across the room applying nail polish. Can you see a pattern developing here? There are actually a few patterns at work. Look, point of view, reaction, look, point of view, reaction, look, point of view. And every time we cut back to Juno, she gets bigger in the frame. And the shots keep getting shorter and shorter as well. All these patterns work together to create a progression that conveys Juno's growing anxiety. Now, at this moment, a break in pattern kicks the sequence and our identification and understanding into overdrive. The shots continue to get shorter and shorter. The sounds get louder and louder as more and more of them join the cacophony. But we stop cutting back to Juno. Instead, we get an uninterrupted, rapid-fire series of 5 fingernail shots. This doesn't mean that we don't still experience and interpret these 5 shots as Juno's point of view. The previous patterns have sufficiently established the connection, so we don't lose it once Juno falls from the pattern. And of course, this sequence doesn't show us only what Juno sees, it lets us experience what she feels. By shifting the pattern to show several fingernail shots in a row, the sequence implies a development in Juno's state of mind. The fingernails and everything they imply have become overwhelming. And when we cut back to Juno, the significance and meaning of the scene's final moment are punctuated by breaking another couple of patterns. For the first time, Juno is not bigger in the frame than she was in her previous shot. The duration pattern shifts too. This shot is 6.5 times longer than any of the previous 9 shots. And her expression has changed. Instead of looking around with growing alarm, she stares blankly down in resignation. But one thing hasn't changed. The Dolly In still conveys her growing realization by gradually enlarging our subject in frame. What makes the end of the sequence especially interesting and effective is something we don't see. We might expect to witness the moment Juno decides to act on her decision to call off the procedure, but we don't see her cover her ears, throw down her clipboard, or jump up from the waiting room bench. Instead, the sequence suddenly surprises our expectations by jumping ahead and dropping us into a slightly different time and space, back to Su-Chin chanting in the parking lot. This jarring shift helps us feel Juno's own instability at this crucial narrative moment. And before we can get our bearings, the camera pivots right to reveal Juno bursting out of the clinic door in the background. Juno races by Su-Chin without saying a word, but we know what she decided and why. Cinematic language, film form, has already told us. And the formal analysis we just finished helps us to understand just exactly how it conveyed that meaning. But of course, formal analysis isn't the only way to dissect a movie. There are many other legitimate frameworks for analysis. These alternative approaches analyze movies more as cultural artifacts than as traditional works of art. They search beneath the movie's form and content to expose implied and hidden messages that inform both our understanding of cinema's function within popular culture and the influence of popular culture on the movies. For example, Considering the protagonist is the daughter of an air conditioner repairman and a manicurist, and the couple she selects to adopt her baby are white-collar professionals living in an oversized McMansion, a cultural analysis of Juno could explore the movie's treatment of class. An analysis from a feminist perspective could concentrate, among other elements, on the movie's depiction of women and childbirth, as well as the depiction of the men in Juno's life. Such an analysis might also consider the creative and ideological contributions of the movie's female screenwriter, Diablo Cody, an outspoken former stripper and sex blogger. A linguistic analysis might explore the historical, cultural, or imaginary origins of the highly stylized slang spouted by Juno, her friends, even the mini-mart clerk who sells her a pregnancy test. A thesis could be, and probably has been, written about the implications of the T-shirt messages displayed by the film's characters, or about the implicit meaning of the movie's running track team motif. Some analyses place movies within the stylistic or political context of a director's career. Juno's young director Jason Reitman has made only one other feature film, Thank You for Smoking, a satire whose protagonist is an enthusiastic spokesman for the tobacco industry. But even that very short filmography provides opportunity for comparative analysis. Both of Reitman's movies take provocative political stances, gradually generate empathy for initially unsympathetic characters, and favor fast-paced expositional montages featuring text, graphics, and first-person voiceover narration. Another comparative analysis could investigate the history of society's attitudes towards illegitimate pregnancy by placing Juno in context with previous films about the subject. From D.W. Griffith's 1920 silent drama Way Down East, which banished its unwed mother and drove her to attempted suicide, to Preston Sturges's irreverent 1944 comedy The Miracle of Morgan's Creek and its mysteriously pregnant protagonist Trudy Kochenlacher, to another mysterious but ultimately far more terrifying pregnancy in Roman Polanski's 1968 horror masterpiece Rosemary's Baby. Juno is only one of a small stampede of recently popular films dealing with this seemingly ever-timely issue. A cultural analysis might compare and contrast Juno with its American contemporaries, Knocked Up and Waitress, both of which share Juno's blend of comedy and drama, as well as a pronounced ambivalence about abortion, but depict decidedly different characters, settings, and stories. What might such an analysis of these movies tell us about our own particular era's attitudes towards women, pregnancy, and motherhood? Does the relative gender of each of the film's creators affect those attitudes? If this comparative analysis incorporated the stark Romanian abortion drama 4 Months, 3 Weeks, and 2 Days, or British director Mike Leigh's nuanced portrayal of the abortionist Vera Drake, the result might inform a deeper understanding of the differences between European and American sensibilities. Any extensive analysis focused on Juno's cultural meaning would have to address what this particular film's content implies about the hot-button issue of abortion. By way of illustration, let's return to the clinic waiting room. An analysis that asserts Juno espouses a pro-life or anti-abortion message could point to the aforementioned explicit details in this sequence that paint a less than flattering picture of the clinic. Juno is confronted by clearly stated and compelling arguments against abortion via Suchin's dialogue. The baby has a beating heart, can feel pain, and has fingernails. Juno's acceptance of this argument may be the most telling evidence for this pro-life interpretation. On the other hand, a counter-argument stating that Juno implies a pro-choice stance could make the case that the lone on-screen representation of the pro-life position is portrayed just as negatively and extremely as the clinic receptionist. Suchin's sign is homemade, her slogan badly worded, and her clothes make her look like she was dressed by an overprotective mother. And Juno's choice can hardly be labeled a righteous conversion. Even after fleeing the clinic, the clearly ambivalent mother-to-be struggles to rationalize her decision, which she announces not as, "I'm having this baby," but, "I'm staying pregnant." Some analysts may conclude that the filmmakers, mindful of audience demographics, were trying to have it both ways. Others could argue that the movie is understandably more concerned with narrative considerations than with a precise political stance. The negative aspects of every alternative are consistent with a story world that offers its young protagonist little comfort and no easy choices. Speaking of choices, these are just a few examples of how students and scholars can interpret the relationship between culture and cinema. But before you can effectively interpret a movie as a cultural artifact, you must first understand how that artifact functions. And that's what this disc is for. Keep watching.